Sanji Jordan, no, Sanju Bonnet, no, that get the pets on a chair, draw up in the Sanji to wash over. Sanji Jordan, no, Sanju Bonnet, that get the pets on a chair. Draw up in the Sanji to wash over, Sanji Jordan, no, Sanju Bonnet, that get the pets on a chair, draw up in the Sanji to wash over. Simchin them cheddar water, the way you and the bojo jig, the yanda, the naji, you and the wajoji, you know me better water. Mijo jojig, naring jering, and the way the yon sem polon and bajojing. Simchin them cheddar water, the way you and the bojoji, the yanda, the naji, you and the wajoji, you know me better water. Mijo jojig, naring jering, and the way the yon sem polon and bajoji. Some chindum chid the wild and the way you and the bajuji, do not do not use your and the wajuji. Do not me pay the water bada, me da wajuji, naring janang, and the winnon. Se me balane bajuji. To the excellent Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I go for refuge until the attainment of enlightenment. By the merits of generosity and others by me, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all beings never be separated from supreme happiness, which is without suffering. May all beings remain in boundless equanimity, free from both attachment to close ones and rejection of others. Warm greetings, friends. I'm Drakpa. Today I thought to explore a topic of the beauty of limitations. Instead of trying to escape kind of how we're held, the constraints, the body, the world, instead of just merely trying to transcend and kind of go beyond. Just thought to highlight some of the beauties and kind of really special components of limitations. The benefit of being embodied, of having a vulnerable container. Yeah. Through the body, through the limitations, through being in touch with things in a living, active way. That's always locates us in the present. We can only feel our sense experience of, felt tactile sensations or things we hear, things we taste, even emotions and memories kind of happening. It always only happens in the present. And so it's kind of this doorway into the present, being limited. It's actually that contact, the limitation, the connection of a body in pain, itching, of a mind moving. It's like if we have this more metacognitive, kind of bigger, spacious perspective, where we can kind of have a little more space and see, kind of like appreciate the physical sensation happening, the mind moving, then this always happens only in the present moment, which is just so profoundly connective, empowering, and also freeing, liberative. Because in this present moment, in this greater, kind of more metacognitive, a larger spacious awareness, we're including more connections, more of the fabric, the weave of interdependence. And this is always in this present wakefulness, that everything that always, happens, what we experience is always today. We can never not be in today. This great master Nyingma Dzogchen Rinpoche said, no matter when we die, it's always going to happen today. And so that's very humbling and kind of very sobering, and in a way very kind of grounding and empowering, because we have these doorways into the Dharma. We have this body, we're in this world, we have these limited sense doors, we have this mind that moves. This is a doorway into our present moment awareness, where we can actually express and enjoy and honor and kind of be with the kind of living, vital thread of reality happening right now. And so this kind of limitation always connects us to time and place, to ourselves and with others, and the actual living world that we're in, the natural world. You can hear all the kind of insects around. It's not like a sterile kind of YouTube studio box. This is just kind of living world. And I don't just mean grass, but just
present moment attention, like engaging with the limited expressions now, like a living world, natural world. And so when we actually tune into living world, we also see how fleeting it is. Like it's so changing so much, and our minds are moving so much. And this kind of attention to kind of being in a body, the limitations, heighten our appreciation of the impermanence of the limitations. That always kind of these things are ever moving. A dynamic system is always in motion. It's always mid-flight. And this attention to impermanence kind of very much activates also this kind of the poignancy of being in a body, of being with others, that the lovely things we experience are quite fleeting. And then the painful kind of suffering and dissatisfaction we experience is quite fleeting as well. So it highlights both these aspects, the gratitude, this precious human embodiment, just so many things we can be grateful for, which means we tune into. We're like honoring them as they happen. We're like caring for aspects of our experience. We're appreciating the larger field of kind of the world we're a part of. And at the same time, this part of this field, this world, this body, this mind is like when it holds unrealistically and tries to kind of like fixate, freeze frame the living motion, the vivid kind of pulse of conditioned kind of limitations, of conditioned kind of things coming together and combining, aggregating for a little bit, and then kind of moving along on their way, disaggregating, dispersing. Like it's suffering, it's unstable, it's uncertain. And kind of when our holding patterns of unrealistically wanting to have something longer than it's actually possible to have, or to avoid a painful thing in a way that it just won't leave us, like on our command. This actually induces kind of a weariness with samsara, a weariness with samsaric mind. It's constantly trying to unrealistically have its way. And this weariness is like this weariness coupled with this impermanence and this gratitude, this appreciation of the preciousness, and also tuning in to like how limited things, bodies and minds, emotions, like how they interact, like this karma or action, lei, this like interactivity of conditioned things, of conditioned experience. Like these four things, the four turnings of the mind of Dharma, the four turnings away from samsara. This is the like reliable foundation of all of Buddhism. Like that's the reason we take refuge. That's the reason we like try to find something reliable amidst an ocean of limitless change. It's like inexhaustible change. We have this gratitude. Things are fleeting. They're like interactive and always dynamically moving. And if I unrealistically hold them in ways that don't allow for that dynamic moving to occur, like I have the kind of traffic jam experience of like really kind of banging my head against things that just aren't real. It's my mind, my expectations not fitting the living pulse of kind of dynamic movement of cause, condition, and effect. And this really brings about the kind of like a genuine, heartfelt, tender, vulnerable spot of me. Is there some other way, you know? Is there something reliable in this ocean of dynamic movement? And then the Buddha taught like the reliable path is to see the like really unhelpful limitation of samsaric grasping mind, of conditioned mind, trying to always control everything, and how that just isn't possible. So how can we surrender to flow with the dynamic kind of movement of cause, condition, and effect, be with the limitations as they're happening in a fresh flowing way? And that becomes the path of Dharma. We take refuge in guides that are totally elegant. They're totally elegant because they free flow with cause, condition, and effect. They no longer kind of like shape or kind of filter their experience through these kind of mistaken, confused habits of always wanting things to kind of stick in a certain way. And these awakened ones, the ones who awaken to this dream just is going to keep going. The movement's going to always keep flowing. There's no beginning, there's no end. These awakened ones that don't kind of unrealistically like believe that everything's just going to work out the way I want it to. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be really upset. They just don't feed that distorted, nightmarish kind of habit anymore. And so they become free. Not free apart from the limitations, but free in or through the limitations. It's through the relative we discover its absolute nature, the great master Nagarjuna said. It's through the relational, through the interdependence, it's through the limitations that we actually see their spacious, interdependent, expansive, inexhaustible qualities. It's more like, they say this, the closer we look at cause, condition, and effect, the closer we are to seeing its like utter indescribability, its ultimate kind of inescapability, its ultimate inability to be pinned down in any one fixed setup. This is like goes right into middle way Nyingma teachings that any model we hold, any system we believe in, any ism, any idea we have, any landscape we try to freeze frame as like a static piece of art, that it's just doomed to fail. And actually, when we like just align with and attune with the living dynamics of kind of limited things coming together, we discover their limitlessness, their inexhaustibility, their overflowing richness. So it's through this relational, the relative, the limitation, that we actually experience the absolute nature, the kind of freedom of the limitation, of the relationality of interdependence. So this is the great kind of union. The great Master Nagarjuna pointed out the union of dependent arising and emptiness. When we look into form, we see its empty nature. It's empty of fixation. It's empty of being stuck. And when we're in this unstuck, kind of ever free-flowing frame of like a being, like it always arises as a dynamic expression, as crystallized, emergent movings, as relationality. It's just clean relationality or pure relationality or like very rich relationality that like holds in this beautiful way its own inexhaustibility. Everything becomes a doorway to Dharma at that point. When we abide in the kind of openness nature of experience, engaging with the openness nature of phenomena, like everything becomes a portal, a way into the Dharma, into the Buddha Dharma, into this non-holding pattern way of showing up with great clear presence. This is so beautiful with these limitations. And so then what happens there, we start getting a little more free on our own side. Like we lessen our kind of unrealistic expectations a bit, and our tenderness naturally extends to include others. They're part of our relational field, self, other, and world. I mean, we're never alone. It's that fact of always over-exaggerating my experience, the way I want it. That's the cause of the loneliness, this ego cherishing, this unrealistic self-absorption, this utter possessiveness to try to always have a unidirectional, kind of field of reality where everything works out the way I want it to. But we kind of lessen that, we relax it, we loosen it. With analysis, we loosen that distorted habit, and all of a sudden, what do we see? We see others. We see the beauty of others. We see the amazing, inexhaustible, open, free richness of others. And so then naturally, that tenderheartedness arises, like, oh, what can I do for others? How can I care for their limitations and appreciate and celebrate their limitations and just enjoy them and support them and nourish them and learn from them? All this in these connections we have, the limitations and how things kind of fabric and weave together becomes this total bountiful, enjoying opportunity, this joyful way to be in time, in space with others. How amazing, all of a sudden kind of it flips the samsaric mind of it always being pervasive suffering to all of a sudden kind of with this open, spacious kind of groundedness in time, in place, in body, in world with others. It flips it into a non-grasping wisdom awareness where we can just celebrate and appreciate the relationality, the connectivity, the interdependence. Appreciate everything is a doorway to Dharma, learning more about cause, condition, and effect, learning more about emotional landscapes, more about the beautiful talents and kind of the sensitivities of all these wounds, the intelligence of just being a vulnerable being, of actually being influenceable, being a being that's exposed, It has the little chinks in the armor, and like I can actually feel the raw, vivid quality of life, because I can't defend against like this vital essence of everything coming together disperses, everything that arises falls, everything born will die, everything that aggregates like will eventually kind of disaggregate. Like there's such a poignancy in that. And so to poise our mind in this open question or this open dimensionality, this kind of fresh, vivid, caring openness that's like very clear and very attending, very kind of like sharply showing up with like the living threads of like what's happening now in this fresh kind of moment that I'm like with these others, then all of a sudden this becomes fuel to like care more, to be more careful, more full of care, to be more responsive, to be more responsible, to be more willing to be held accountable, to really take the responsibility of like lessening other beings' suffering. This is like doorway to compassion. The limitation is totally the doorway to compassion and to the open freedom, emptiness quality of, natural condition, the natural way our heart and mind is when it's not falsely kind of like layering or kind of like, shelling itself over, cocooning itself, and like my way only. This is all through limitation. It's all through the relational, through the relative. It's because we're embedded, embodied, enmeshed, extended in time and space, that we can actually see, kind of realize the inexhaustible quality of everything extended in time and space and mind. It's the beauty that when we stop fighting the limit, we actually recognize the nature of the limit, and that kind of it becomes the pathway to freedom, to liberation, like seeing the absolute, indescribability, inexhaustibility, uncategorizability of cause, condition, and effect. By seeing the inexhaustibility, we include more of the detail of cause, condition, and effect. That's why samsara and nirvana are relational and kind of empty, open quality. They're not in a war. They say in the more higher, like Dzogchen teachings, there's like two aspects of one nature. Dependent arising is emptiness. Emptiness is dependent arising. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is none other than emptiness. Emptiness is none other than form. And this leads into kind of more of the Tantra approach of like also highlighting the limitation. Like Tantra includes body and speech or form, Rupakaya. It includes the expressive quality, the form, the arising kind of more tangible or outreaching quality of openness or emptiness. Body and speech. Speech is from formless open awareness. Speech arises as semi-form, kind of this moving, this energetic moving, this kind of like crystallizing, emergent kind of sparking field, which then further distills or crystallizes into form. So we go from formless into semi-form into form. And then within form, like it always has these subtler layers of semi-form, which is always in this inexhaustible field of formlessness. So from mind arises speech or sound or energy, arises or distills into form. And that form always happens as a kind of more condensed expression of semi-form or this kind of vibratory movement of awareness. And when we do that kind of like while abiding in the ground of that openness, the formlessness, just mind, then the natural expression of mind, the relational outreaching qualities of mind become an ornament of awareness. That body and speech become an ornament of mind. Instead of inhibiting mind, they become the expressive kind of creative beauty of mind. And this is kind of how Tantra includes like pure body, pure speech, and pure mind, where all of a sudden kind of the limitations of body and speech, this impure relative truth, impure body and impure speech, all of a sudden they're not seen as obstacles to freedom, to the doorway of the Dharma. They're not blocking the doorway. They're actually, when we kind of rest in and recognize and kind of release and abide in the openness quality, the absolute quality of relationality, this emptiness awareness, that emptiness awareness always arises as form, as expression, as sound, as space, as speech, as body. And so this is like how Tantra arises, as from pure mind arises pure sound or semi-form arises as pure form. And that's the whole path, like the whole process of kind of enacting that in like kind of formal meditation, so that we can do that in post-meditation, just natural kind of life, usual life. We try to recognize at the beginning kind of this pure, formless, open mind or awareness, that then kind of like without any specific focus, just an all-inclusive, pervasive kind of compassion, this inclusivity, this comprehensiveness of pure semi-form, this boundless energetic fields of interactivity that then crystallize into very specific forms, like as a syllable, which then crystallizes further into a body, like a deity, a pure body of a Buddha, which then takes more ornamentation, more crystallization as a deity with ritual ornaments that have meaning. They're always referring to this pure aspects, pure body, pure speech, pure mind, or pure relative truth in union with the great equality of absolute truth. And then that being, that Buddha with the ornaments, like the ritual objects, then has a greater field of being with others, a retinue, in a sacred world, a mandala. And that's the container of a meditation practice or a sadhana practice in Tibetan Buddhism. In a sacred world of form with self, other, and world doing enlightened activities, and kind of then it just, in one way you can see it dissolving, and another way you can see it as like expanding into a greater field of subtlety. Like from the form, the pure form goes into pure like sound, into pure mind. And then so this is a practice in Mahayoga. It's called the Satchinis Samadhi, is pure mind, displaying as pervasive compassion, as they call it compassion without focus, or this this pure sound, pure semi-form, which then distills into the seed syllable samadhi of the true nature samadhi, then kind of like crystallize into the all-arising compassion samadhi, which then crystallizes into the seed syllable samadhi. And so pure body into pure speech into pure mind, and then pure mind into pure speech into pure body, and then that activity of the enlightened mandala eventually goes into dissolution, or the completion stage without characteristics, where it goes from pure form opening into pure semi-form, opening into pure mind. And these are all simultaneously happening. Emptiness arising as form with the nature of emptiness. And so here in a tangible kind of practical way, and like a formal meditation session, we're actually engaging openness arising as limitation or expression, and expression kind of always having the nature, the essence of kind of a limitless naturalness, limitless openness that includes interdependence. So this is in Tibetan Buddhism how we actually practice this in like formal sessions according to very specific lineage guidance, received, taught by the Buddha and Guru Rinpoche in this succession of kind of unbroken succession of lineage masters down to our own personal teacher. And then we receive kind of like, ritualized like ways of encoding all this deep layered meaning into these simple practical kind of like form-based, body-based, sound-based techniques that remind us this kind of like indescribable depth of meaning of the union of relative and absolute. And then through that ritualization, we also receive pith instructions with our teachers on how to elegantly synthesize all of this as a single moment of present awareness, the union of form, semi-form, and formlessness, of body, of speech, of mind, all is like a seamless whole, always happening, both a pure side, when pure meaning we're not grasping, like unrealistically, and it also has the ability to see the impure nightmares of what happens when we do grasp. Why? Because we've actually been there. We've done that. We're in that. And sentient mind, samsaric mind, we can see how when we unrealistically hold onto limitations and don't allow them to breathe, we get the traffic jam experience of just suffering, dissatisfaction of various kinds. And so this is kind of also part of the beauty of the time. So much interdependence, so much is coming together. All these layered, complex worlds are kind of like, in a large part, crashing into one another at very high speeds and rates. And unpredictable kind of unintended consequences, or kind of surprising emergences, or kind of recombinations of worlds upon worlds upon worlds interacting very quickly at big scales, is causing a lot of heartache, a lot of distress. If we look at natural systems of weather, of a lot of systems of chemistry between people, societies, culture making is kind of getting kind of disheveled. Or kind of like, it's so kind of like the richness is so kind of like pouring out. And this, in terms of limitations, is kind of like why this is like perfect Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist time. There's like a certain Vajrayana practice called chud, or like cutting through duality fixation. And that this practice is specifically designed where we target the most sensitive places that we fixate the most, that we hold on to the most, these vulnerable spots where we're just like refusing to get in touch with those spots. And so there are these like bedrock layers of duality habits that are just like saturating so much of our experience. So what chud does is it goes directly to those most sensitive spots, those biggest blind spots. But how do we see blind spots? In this specific practice, we put ourselves in a triggering situation. We put ourselves at the mercy of like a really activating, like uncontrollable situation. Like people would go to a charnel ground or go to a cemetery, and very unkept of wild animals, savage beasts and corpses. And like they say in this chud practice, it doesn't work unless you get what's called lungse. Lungse, this hook. You get into a situation and your body, the hairs stand on end. And all of a sudden your sense doors sharpen, they brighten. It's like through the portal of being activated, being triggered by like this uncontrollable situation. What's going to happen? It gets this hook, this lungse. And when that activation happens, that's when we apply the cutting through technique of chud, of instantly releasing our duality fixation. So that habit of like self-grasping, me, I am going to survive, I need to be safe, like that habit is turned on. All these sense doors show up very brightly in coordination. And then right then we release the kind of like distorted habit that kind of causes us to reify things as being so real me and real danger and real world with real consequence, all this realness, this reifying kind of like fixation, we release it. And so relevant to these times, 20th century information flood, kind of everything's like a charnel ground now. That's my experience of it. It's all kind of late breaking emergency news. Everything is like warning, this is bad, this is wrong, this is a surprising thing, now this, now that. And so even if it's not actually that way, because there's so much beauty and preciousness, like what we're fed, what we're largely exposed to is the late breaking emergency news. So we're kind of constantly asked to be in this triage, this state of like activated trigger, like fight or flight or freeze or fawn mode. And that's like a charnel ground. And so at that point, if we can use these techniques of Tibetan Buddhism, of Vajrayana, to instantly release these dense root level habit patterns of ego cherishing, of self-absorption, then that becomes the perfect container to constantly be in this bright, vivid, synthesized, like engaged, present moment based experience. It's deeply in touch with living movement. It's also cutting through our restrictive habits that shut us down, that freeze us, that make us run, that make us plead, that like, have unrealistic wishes for some magical pill, like just get out of this thing now. Like we open our heart and open our mind. But like what His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche Jigdra Yeshe Dorje says in Mountain Retreat Instructions, is that if we don't first have a stable grounding or sensitivity to, a familiarity with the openness of mind, the emptiness of mind, empty awareness, then putting ourselves in very triggering situations like a charnel ground will actually be harmful. Because without that open, spacious heart, then constantly being triggered will cause us to shut down and so-called regress, like lock up tighter and tighter and tighter, become more and more dysfunctional, more and more reactive, more and more always on edge, more and more triggerable. And this will cascade into like a deep weakness, where like any challenge we experience will be seen as a threat. Even just like being exposed to a different opinion or a different unfamiliar kind of way of being, a different food, a different sound, a different kind of idea, a different way of, designing culture, or like, grieving or celebrating. This newness, the novelty, will be experienced as a threat, because we're training ourselves to be constantly so on edge. We don't have this spacious metacognitive ability to like have a larger field of awareness and care, of love, compassion, and wisdom, of bodhicitta, to be with that kind of like active creative impulse to brighten our sense doors. We don't have that. It's not held within this more spacious, tender-hearted compassion field. And so it causes us to lock and lock and lock, further and further, denser and denser, tighter and tighter, more and more real, more fixated, more fundamentalist. And so at the same time as this time being like the perfect opportunity for certain kind of more Vajrayana or tantric techniques, to activate our love, compassion, and wisdom more directly, more immediately, more thoroughly, more like a whole system, body, speech, mind kind of response that's synthesized as a whole. Instead of that, it'll cause us to do the opposite. We shut down systemically. We collapse more completely. And so that's kind of this razor's edge of this time, that everything's going to ask us to bring our full attention, our full care, to really fully show up. And if we don't have the kind of nutritive support and kind of creative kind of willingness to like relaxedly, lightheartedly engage with clear attention, it's going to cause us to like really have a hard time. And so that's the kind of silver lining, I guess you could say, of this time. Like, but it's also the demand. It's that big responsibility of like, we can like, these giant kind of ancient iceberg duality fixations that we've like frozen, these like fresh flowing habits of our like spontaneous creative mind. We've frozen them so rigidly over just eons of time, and kind of with the bright warmth of our bodhicitta, of really caring for relationships, of caring for others, of caring for our world, of caring for ourselves in an open, spacious, accommodating way that is honoring the dynamic movement of self, others, and nature. This is just such a sweet kind of window opportunity. But it's this Goldilocks ratio for each of us that's so critically important. We need enough stress, enough kind of activation, enough kind of energy that we kind of have to show up brightly. It's called hormesis. Just enough stress that like turns on our adaptive intelligence of our kind of interlayered system of body, speech, and mind. We need just enough stress that it asks us to fill up, to like fill ourselves with like presence, vivid, bright, loving attention. It's clear. It's like really showing up for the threads that are actually happening right now. But it's just enough. It's not too much stress that we drown, and it's not no stress that we like basically have a lot of boredom and kind of opportunity to just create drama for ourselves. But it's just this kind of hormetic ratio of just enough, and that comes down to each person. How am I going to hold, how am I going to intentionally constrain the limitations of the world that I'm going to be responsible for showing up for? We have to consciously keep choosing how to participate with what. And that usually starts really local if we want to be practical. In my body, in my mind, with my friends and family, in this immediate local context where we get this real live feedback loop of self, other, in world in a very local context that's not this abstract kind of mapping. It's this actual like living, vivid kind of sense door interactivity, like right now in this field with this breeze and these animals and my emotions and kind of like the embedded richness of this local context. I have to keep choosing that, because otherwise it's just going to autofill for me. Like the scrolling will autofill, like, and that's being filled by something that's I'm not choosing. I'm just kind of surrendering to like whatever happens to be put in front of me. Like I have to intentionally own, or kind of like really carefully like choose to be with what I want to be with. And it's all going to be limited. It's all going to be a context, a time and a place, in space, in time, in body. It's all going to be this layered set of limitation. And I consciously choose to be with something like, whether that's a community, or whether that's caring for a certain art form, or whether that's choosing to like read a page of a book from top to bottom and not just jump, not just monkey mind jump between all these things as if I'm elegant enough to just be flexibly in every way all the time. Like, I know my mind, that's just a way to avoid actually going deep. Like, I need to intentionally place my kind attention, my like creative impulse, into something carefully, like full of care, and really like be with that thread of interdependence, that person, or my own body, or my own mind happening now. I have to intentionally hold that in a small enough way where I can really receive the movement of what that person is, of who I'm with, or of what my mind's doing, and I can learn from it. I can actually like have the fullness of that relationality inform me to relax more, to creatively flex more, to include more perspectives, to like release the kind of like unrealistic habit to like, it's only like this. No, there's such an outflowing multiplicity of every single moment. And then by like caring for, like intentionally constraining my context, what I'm going to show up and care for, it actually enables it, like it opens up that really rich kind of like network, or like family or world or relationship. It opens up that small pocket of really high quality worlding into greater worlds that it's already a part of. I just wasn't available to be with that much richness yet, that much interconnectivity, that much dynamic movement. But if I do really high quality job in this spot, in this world, in this body, in this little small world I'm choosing to be with, it naturally is already enfolded in larger worlds. It naturally includes all these like more subtle sub-worlds. That's the holonic interdependent nature of things. Like, the macro includes the micro extends into the macro. And for Buddhism, this is happening without any final boundary in time or space. Like, interdependence is truly inexhaustible. It can't be finally categorized by any representational model. Like, it just layers itself through and through in all ways, very specific patterned ways. So I choose to show up in a kind of small way with really high, rich, dense connectivity, relationality, caring for the limits that both hold that kind of my participation accountable, and they also naturally open it and empower and extend it to be even more relational, more caring, more sensitive, more flexible. So that's, again, this thread of Tantra. By showing up in form, we see its larger, like interconnected, kind of spacious or formless, flex flow, dynamic quality. And by being in a more spacious way with our mind and our heart, we actually show up for the detailed quality of the threads of relationship that are like in our present experience. And we do this formally in meditation sessions and like different practices we're doing, and we do it informally or in post-meditation, just in like natural living situations. And gradually we stabilize this emptiness mind, open mind, into like a lived, careful, detailed kind of attention of self and others and world. And it gradually, our abilities extend to include more relationality, more of the limitations. So we're caring for more of the limitations more accurately, and we're simultaneously seeing the inexhaustible kind of like overflowing nature of those interactions, of those limitations. So that's kind of what I thought to share today. The kind of beauty of limitations, the beauty of being limited. Like, if when we really look closely at the limitation, it's limitless. We really show up for the relative or the relational, we find its absolute or ultimate unfindability. Like, and always honoring both of these aspects is the way to like really be with the demand, the challenge of living now, of like having this much richness funnel into our sense doors, like kind of interruptedly all the time. Like, this is kind of the loving opportunity each of us have. So I'm actively kind of trying to show up for this. I mean, little by little, it's a little by little thing. Every little drop actually is the ocean. And so, yeah, send you love. Yeah, thanks so much. Dedicate the merit. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of earth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara may I free all beings, the precious bodhicitta, and those without it may it be generated, and those who have it may it never diminish, but always continue increasing. Deity, mantra, and dharmakaya are the nature of appearance, sound, and awareness, the pervasive kaya and wisdom display of the Buddhas. May practitioners of the profound and secret great perfection remain inseparable from the innermost one-taste awareness of wisdom mind. Thanks. Love.